Today is August the 24th, 2017. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University. And today we are in the Angie DeBow room on campus of OSU to speak with Dr. Dennis Martin. And I'll see if I get your title right. You can correct me if it's wrong. Professor, Department of Agriculture and Landscape Architecture?
Professor, and it's in the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture. Yeah, in the Division of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources.
So I got it wrong. I apologize.
Very close.
And turf grass extension.
Yes, turf grass extension specialist.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming today. Let's begin with learning a little bit about you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Iroquois County, Illinois, in the town of Watseka, the county seat, in 1961. And that's in east central Illinois, just in from the Indiana state line.
Okay. And did you have brothers and sisters?
I have one older sister and one older brother, so I'm the baby of the family.
Okay. And what did your parents do for a living?
My parents each grew up on farms and left the farming community not long after they were married. My dad actually worked as a hired hand for one of his best friends in high school, farmed for a while, and then took a factory job with a company called OOHRP. They printed forms, and they moved from their home area not far, about 30 miles, to a small community called Woodland, Illinois. Tiny little spot on the map, only 350 people. And my dad and mom lived there all their life, and in that small little community. And I went to high school in Watseka, which was the county seat, just 5 miles away.
And you graduated what year?
I graduated high school in 1979.
And did you have a favorite subject?
I enjoyed biology. And
go figure, right?
Shouldn't be a shocker that I have a career within one of the many possible fields of biology.
Oh, once they moved off the farm, did you go back to a farm, like to help grandparents or anything like that?
I actually didn't grow up on the farm,
Okay.
but grew up in the small community. They
Okay.
had actually, being the baby of the family, they had moved on into the small community. But I actually worked during my teenage years on the farms of my friends, best friends, who their parents were still farming in the area. So I enjoyed working in the seed production fields, and that is not too far off from what I actually do as a career, even though it's with different crops.
Did you have to cut hay and toss hay bales and all of that?
Baled hay and wheat straw, and then also helped put up grain bins, and also robed crops to make sure the right parent plants were left in the field, and weeded fields by hand hoe, and walked, and also looked for artifacts of Native Americans while I was walking in those fields, which was a second passion of mine, archaeology. But I was told by a person to, if you didn't think you could make money at your hobbies, go make money at something else and then play at your hobbies.
Well, would you find some?
Quite a few. East Central Illinois was very rich in ancient Native American culture, and there were always artifacts to be uncovered in the plowed fields, especially right after a rain.
Okay, cool. That would be a neat benefit. And you can actually say you know what the phrase row to hoe, that what a row to hoe, what that means.
I know about several types of cultivation and hoes, and all about the blisters that come with hand hoes.
Okay. Well, in high school, were you involved with 4-H or FFA or any outside activities like that?
I was highly into about every sport that they had, but you could only do one at a time, and that's pretty much the way the other kids were. I was involved in track and football, a little too short for basketball, but enjoyed intramurals in basketball. Wasn't involved actually in FFA or 4-H. Both my father and mother were involved in 4-H when they were in high school, but grade school actually. But when it came to me, actually between the sports and then the large garden that my parents had and my other activities, hiking, outdoors, and biking, those types of things, I was pretty jammed up schedule-wise.
Had a little fun in there too, sounds like.
You bet.
So once you graduated from high school, college, I'm assuming was an assumed that you were going?
My brother had kind of started that for the family. Neither of my parents had gone to college, but my aunt and uncle on my father's side did, and they were both teachers until their retirement. And my brothers went to school at University of Illinois as engineering, so I always looked up to my brother, being 9 years older than myself. So I followed somewhat in a different field, but University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and started in forestry and transferred into horticulture. Started there in greenhouse management, moved into ornamentals, and eventually settled in turfgrass management.
Got it all.
I did.
About how far was that from home?
That was only about 55 miles away, only just about an hour, hour and a half travel time.
Far enough. Did they take you and drop you off, or did you go on your own?
I had a very old used vehicle that was completely unreliable, but I kept it with me and had nothing but problems with various used vehicles. So when I could finally get my own new vehicle several years later, it was a real joy. But I struggled with various used, decrepit vehicles during that time, but kind of kept them going and rattling around to get me around.
So you would have graduated from there in
1983 with a Bachelor of Science in Ornamental Horticulture.
And what had you planned to do with that?
I wanted to try golf course management, and during my junior year I had a internship at Champaign Country Club over the summer, and after working that internship I found that while I was very interested in it, it was not as interesting as the possibilities of science, because I got to do a little bit of lab work for my undergraduate advisor, who also was working with graduate students, and I can actually say by the time I finished my junior year, I knew that I had a great interest in graduate school. And the interesting thing was that President John Campbell, former President John Campbell of Oklahoma State University, was actually the dean of the College of Agriculture at University of Illinois. And he created what I believe was, with my round of students, the first opportunity for undergraduate financial awards to participate in research for those students that showed some aptitude for research. And it was kind of an appetizer, so to speak, to see if you would enjoy that and then go into graduate school. So I had won that award as a junior going into senior year, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I knew what I wanted to do in terms of graduate study, turfgrass science. So
Research early on, that's good.
yes.
Well, you mentioned golf course. Did you play golf? I'll have to ask that. Did you play golf?
I did play a little bit of golf, but I was absolutely horrible at it. But I have to say, in being a poor golfer, you know that you're not going to be a champion golfer, so then you can let go and enjoy it and not stress over it. So any day on the golf course when you're playing is a good day, as long as you just enjoy being out there and playing and quit worrying about what your score is.
Sure, and then there's different types of grasses on one too. I guess that would intrigue you a little bit.
Yes, it did.
Yes.
As well as the wildlife that you'd see on the course. So I enjoyed the full spectrum of the golf course, not only the cultivated, built world of it with cultivated plants, but also the wild aspect of nature on the golf courses.
So you knew you were going to grad school. Did you contemplate different places to go?
For graduate school, undergraduate, finances, well, as most graduate students will tell you, finances are everything. They're probably the #1 factor. So a Master Science program, the assistantship was very promising, so I took it without much consideration of where to go, because I knew my advisor and I knew quite a few of the faculty and thought it would be a pretty efficient program, and it did turn out to be that way. Between the Master Science and the PhD, I actually looked around at other schools and looked at the financial packages and the esteem of the different institutions, and then did choose University of Illinois to go back to, because I have to say, because it was ranked very well, I knew it was going to be an efficient program, but also, again, because of the particular value of the financial package that I was going to get as assistants to go there.
And who was your mentor?
That's Dr. Dave Wayner. He was both my undergraduate final advisor there after going through a series of programs there, as well as during my master's and PhD program. And I did take about 8 months off during the time between my master's and PhD program to do a very fulfilling internship. That was with Elanco Specialty Products. That was a division of Eli Lilly Company. That is a part of the corporation that would eventually merge with part of Dow and become Dow AgroSciences, and they're still working in the green industry today. And I actually still, up until I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, was working with some of the people that I mentored under while on the internship, but they were pretty much all retired now at this time.
You started your resume early.
Yes, I enjoyed it, and it gave me a view of the industry aspect and what options were there after I got out of the PhD program. I was told by my sales manager that he could hire me, but he didn't feel like my passion was going to be in sales. He felt like I was a researcher at heart, so he says, I'm not going to give you that offer, even though we could do that, but I really think you'd say no. And I said to him right then and there, Jerry Cash was his name, national sales manager with Elanco Specialty Products, and I said, Jerry, you pegged me to a T. Exactly.
So you knew academia was your end goal there?
I did at that time feel that way, and have a real passion for the university system. Actually did get a chance to work with the plant scientists as well as the salespeople in Lilly. And interestingly enough, even if I had been offered a job in the plant sciences, they laid off about 60% of their field staff just a few months after which I would have started if I'd have been able to take an offer even in the research end of things. So I probably would have been looking back at a PhD program no matter what had transpired after that internship.
So once you get your PhD, take us through your career path from that point.
Career path, interviewed a couple different places. One place my wife and in-laws dearly thought they would love to have me, but when I interviewed there, it just didn't feel right. And I actually looked at this position and I had a gut feeling I was going to get an offer from Oklahoma State. And it just felt right from the standpoint of looking at the position description and this inner feeling that, hey, I think I'm going to land there. I just don't know why. My wife was heartbroken that I didn't get an offer from the other place, and my in-laws as well. But it didn't feel right during the interview, and the interview here felt very good. But I have to say, when the May tornado in 1990 hit, and I was watching on the news of this distant land of Stillwater, Oklahoma being hit by this tornado, I was kind of selfish in my fear. I hope it didn't damage the university too much, because I don't want them being in such a financial crisis that they don't keep the position up. Even though there's a tragedy with every tornado and sometimes some lives lost and tragedies like that, the damage, of course, wasn't too bad from that. But one of the interesting things about that entire situation would be that several years later, I would actually buy a piece of land rurally that had a tree knocked over from that very tornado. And it was doing push-ups. It was on its side, and it looked like a tree doing push-ups. So I preserved that tree because of that series of strange events and thoughts all through that time period, those very many years.
So you started at OSU in 1990?
I did. I started in September of 1990. Yes.
So how many years we're going on?
Coming up on 27 years this next month. And I had been here not long over 10 months, and my research and teaching partner in the program announced that he was going to work for Gulf Enterprises as their in-house agronomist. So he waved goodbye and said, the program is yours. So just a mere 10 months in, I had the lead spot in the program, you'd say, and at that particular time, it was another one of those budget crunch years in 91. Our dean decided, we're not quite in a position to be able to hire that. So I moved from an extension and research split to a three-way split of teaching, research, and extension. I had a chance to teach the undergraduate turf management course and also our advanced level course and had some couple graduate students that were very helpful that I picked up from my departing research partner, and had very close relationships with those two fellas in terms of they were actually older than me and they were my graduate students, which puts you in an interesting position. It's usually the other way around, so it's easy for students to follow an advisor's course of action, but when the graduate students are either they're slightly older or just barely older, it's an interesting relationship to have graduate students that are actually older than you are, and that's what I found myself in just 10 months afterwards.
But you figured it out.
I figured it out, and we had lifelong friendships with actually both those students being just slightly older than me to about my age.
And where was your office? Or is it still the same place?
Actually, it's still the same office over on the 3rd floor of Agriculture Hall.
And same place for 27 years?
Yes.
Oh. And what has been some of your research along the way?
I've had a chance to work in many different areas of turfgrass management, but principally involved in screening varieties within species. We call them cultivars or cultivated varieties for their performance in Oklahoma. Everything from putting green bent grasses to putting green Bermuda grasses, types for golf course fairways and roughs, as well as grasses for the roadside, and also how to manage them. Many aspects from fertilization and mowing situations, various pest management situations on them. So really the full gamut from the research standpoint. And then also I walked into a program that needed someone to help screen for winter hardiness, the Bermuda grasses. So that also became my principal role on the team when my research partner left, was to take over that role. And I periodically relinquish parts of that, but I have been through, I would say, 3 research partners. I'm on my 4th research partner here at this time. So we kind of trade off and give parts of the breeding development program, Bermuda grass breeding development program, to various people that come and go through the programs. The breeder actually has been over in the Plant and Soil Sciences Department, formerly Agronomy Department. So I had a chance to work and mentor with Dr. Charles Taliaferro. He was credited with development of several forage grasses and also with Riviera and Yukon turf Bermuda grasses. And those are seeded types, which have done very well, released from Oklahoma State University. But I was credited being one of the 4 or 5 co-inventors on those grasses. And then about the time that Charles retired, we had some things that were very promising, and one of his 2 last graduate students, Yanqi Wu, who I work with very closely now, Yanqi being in plant and soil sciences. Yanqi had just completed a kind of an interim time period between the end of his PhD and interviewing and being selected for the turf breeding and genetics position. So we sat around a table trying to decide which varieties to send to a national test, and we fortunately picked 2 home run grasses that would later become Latitude 36 and Northbridge Bermuda grass. We sent those as experimental types off to the national program. They both did very, very well, and about 3 years into that 5-year trial, we all made a decision to release those. And so those are very popular in the industry right now. But in the meantime, there's always new grasses coming along, and so those have been out for about 7 years. And we're on to the next generation of materials, and just released OKC 1131 this summer. And at this very moment, the licensees are being chosen. We're looking at the response to the RFPs on those. So the licensees are soon to be chosen, and that'll be announced shortly as to who will get the contracts on production of the 1131. So
they're considered an invention?
They are.
So you have a patent?
So the folks that are credited with the co-invention will work together as a team to file an invention disclosure with the Technology Development Center, and then there's a decision made by the center, as well as our leadership and Division of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources, and a plant material review team as to whether the invention has the merits for the marketplace. And they actually give permission for releasing the material. And the people that sit on that team are those who breed and develop and screen other plant species within the division. So there'll be folks working on wheat, peanut, various things. And they're part of that release committee. And if you're a member of the release committee, you review the inventions and the request to release the materials of others. So it's a cordial environment, sometimes challenging questions, but generally by the time you make a request to release something, one, their co-inventors feel good about the material. So most things that are asked to be released do in fact get released because you're on a release team of about 5 people, the turf breeder, myself being involved with field screening, and in our case 2 or 3 others with field screening. So 4 to 5 co-inventors. You've all tried to exploit the holes in the armor of the variety, so to speak. So you feel good by the time you asked for permission to release. So that's usually a thumbs up for release, and then the Technology Development Center decides if they indeed have interest in pursuing advertising it to find out if industry is interested.
Financial commitment at that point.
Yes, because they're actually going to be paying for the patent. The release team, the co-inventors, actually generally write most of the patent. It is touched up though by the university's patent attorneys and folks at the Technology Development Center. But when you work on one of these teams, there are many years of experience on there. So generally most of the patent in its original form is written by the team and then touched up by the university's attorney and the Technology Development Center.
So all of that takes about 5 years, 10 years, start to finish?
Well, when the Bermuda program was originally gearing up, it took about 20 years from the time that it started up until it really met its first goal, producing cold hardy improved Bermuda grasses. Once the program is geared up, provided there's stability in it, even if people leave, as long as there's some mentor time for folks and the team isn't cleaned out, releases will happen on the order of maybe every 3 to 5 years. But for instance, we're on the fast track now, but you're still looking at maybe 7 to 10 years from the time you're working with the experimental material until it really gets released. But that's considered fast compared to 20-some years. So as long as the team is up and rolling now, and we have several things in the chute, so to speak, almost too much. So you try to look for weaknesses to really parry down the material so that you're only working with, just a fraction of a percent of the material that you started with.
When you say screen testing, what does that entail?
Well, the first step is making sure that it has adaptation here at Stillwater. And that includes, is it winter hardy enough? Does it do well in the summer? Does it deliver the characteristics of what the end user is looking for? Where does it actually fit? Is it a putting green type? Is it a lawn type? Is it a naturalized area type? So things go different paths depending upon what the features of the grass are. It has many hoops or hurdles, so to speak, to jump through. But it needs good environmental stress tolerance to pests, crazy weather like we have here in Oklahoma. And by the way, other people send their stuff here to be tested because of how wild our weather is. If it's not hail, it's tornadoes, drought, fire, freezing conditions, boiling heat. So something that can jump through those hoops and make it through is really valuable.
And is there a greenhouse or what? Where do you do the research?
We use greenhouses. We use control environmental chambers. We use the field quite a bit and the passage of time. There's nothing better than having materials sitting out in the environment, manage them the way that they'll be managed by the end user, and just allowing several years of time to pass, and you'll get a different set of weather conditions during a period of several years. And small percentage of stuff will have elite performance features, and then we have a national trial about once every 5 years, the National Turf Grass Evaluation Program, NTEP or NTEP, of which I've been a policy committee and national chair, and different researchers at different universities go onto that committee at different times, and then you pass through the different positions and leadership position, and then you step back from it and let the next generation go through that as well. I've really enjoyed working as part of that group and still participate in committees still with that group, but you supply your best material periodically to that test. Either the team or the university will pay for materials to be tested, and it's a system where it's a nonprofit NTEP. It helps connect folks that have promising materials with those that are willing to screen the materials in various environments for a fee. And in some cases, you play the role of the person that's supplying material to be screened. Other times, you'll play the role of the one who's willing to accept payment to, in an unbiased fashion, screen the material in your particular environment and then supply the data. Good thing about the NTAP, National Turfgrass Evaluation Program, is it does not make recommendations. It merely recruits testing people, pays them to conduct the work in an unbiased fashion, submit the data. The data then is in the public domain. It's posted on a website so that anybody can find it. So the data will follow the cultivar. There's no way really to hide that, even though there's name changes, because there's ways to find what something has been renamed to. So it's a very good system. It was proudly started in the United States of America. It has extended a little bit into Canada with some of the cool season grasses. Sometimes some of the more southern sites in Canada do participate in testing in that program for some of the cool season materials. The warm season materials obviously stay, of lower latitude, thus being in the northern hemisphere.
Do you do practice any like on Karsten Creek or the baseball field, or?
Well, interestingly enough, we have sent things to Karsten Creek, but some of your best test sites are actually the ones where they will abusively manage the grass. Karsten Creek is highly refined in its management, so it really doesn't tell you a lot about how the grass will perform under troubling management conditions. So it's actually, Karsten Creek's a wonderful place to play golf. It's just absolutely fantastic. I usually lose a dozen golf balls there between the water and the deep rough. But actually some of the best places to test are low maintenance golf courses where they're not going to be able to keep up with the management. They're financially challenged. Or actually we test sometimes in people's home lawns where, interestingly enough, they'll tell us about what they plan to do, but what they're actually able to do sometimes can be drastically different than what they told you they were going to be able to do. So we do even use home lawns. We have used the lawns of colleagues even in our own program. And the good thing about that is they know how it should be managed, and they're good at reporting the conditions that they actually managed the grass under.
So you have different strands at your house?
I have different buffalo grass stands, actually. I'm a fan of buffalo grass, a hobby dabbler, hobby breeder of those materials and collectors. At my prior house, I did use some different Bermuda grasses for that, but actually people ask that question and they think, well, you must have all of OSU's experimental lines. Actually, at this moment, I don't. But different buffalo grass lines.
Still have the best grass in the neighborhood?
I live in a rural property, and if you compared it to urban lawns, I would say no, because my personal philosophy is that I want to have things that are environmentally sound, and that I think the turfgrass person should actually lead in having grasses that have very low inputs and yet quite satisfactory quality. So I have a very large lawn. It's 2/3 of an acre, and it's on a 22-acre small little ranchette, so to speak. And the actual footprint of the lawn is about 2/3 of an acre, and that's quite a bit to manage. So I put it in buffalo grass, and I actually like to give tours to folks that think they want a buffalo grass lawn. And I took that project on because oftentimes people will tell me, well, you can't have a buffalo grass lawn, Bermuda grass will get in it. Well, tell me that I can't do something with the grass and I'll prove you wrong. I have a little small St. Augustine lawn in the back, and you're not supposed to be able to grow St. Augustine because of winter hardiness issues in Stillwater, but placement is everything. We call it the right plant in the right place. So I do dabble a little bit with certain other species, but actually not with Bermuda grass in that particular area. We have several acres of it at the Turfgrass Center, though, where I get to see plenty of it. So.
Okay. Where is that? The Turfgrass Center?
The Turfgrass Center is located about three quarters of a mile west of Stillwater on West Virginia Avenue. It's at the OSU Botanic Garden facility.
Okay. Well, have you had any that's failed?
Have we had any that's failed? The first grasses that I actually participated in the release, you go back to 1991, I immediately was thrust into a role of helping OSU to work with Kansas State University with two of their releases. The releases were mid-lawn and mid-field. Those I kind of cut my teeth on, and our team kind of cut our teeth on. They didn't fare real well in the marketplace, but they were a great learning experience for us. In fact, both of those lost their licensees within a matter of about 3 to 4 years. There were some long-term licensees, but the bulk of them left their licenses quite soon after signing those licenses. So they just weren't very well adapted. But we participated in that release. They weren't actually our grasses.
Well, this Latitude 36 has been a success.
It has been. One of the best things to be able to say about it is that it's on the football field of the OU Sooners. It's on Owen Field. That speaks highly of how valued it is. And actually Northbridge, which we released at the same time, is on some of the intramural fields down there, practice fields. So both Latitude 36 and Northbridge have gotten use on the fields at OU. Jeff Salmon is the field manager there, and he speaks highly of them. And then both Latitude 36 and Northbridge have gotten use on professional sports fields as well. For instance, a couple years back, a majority of the World Series games at Kauffman Stadium, baseball stadium up in Kansas City, on the Kansas City Royals, the infield is actually Latitude 36. So I got to see Latitude 36 during the World Series games on TV. They have a Kentucky Bluegrass outfield. The Northbridge is actually on the Kansas City Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium field there in Kansas City. And those are just two of the fields. There's various fields around the country that have one or the other on them.
Do you get to go visit?
Actually have a lot of invites, and you have to turn a lot down. It's kind of like golf as well. You get a lot of invites to play golf and see your materials here and there, but actually time doesn't really permit much in the way of going to see everything. But I do enjoy going out occasionally to see where the grasses have been placed and visit with the folks that are managing them. I learn a lot from them. In the end, with turf grasses, it's the research that kind of guides the release, but a good or bad grass will not be able to escape its research. And if the research said it was good, but it doesn't work for the end users, it's going to fail. If it's a good grass, even if it had mediocre research results and the end users like it and it works for them, the research becomes somewhat meaningless at that point because the end users like it, and it's that word of mouth and communications. And most people in sports turf management or golf turf management, they go to the locations of their peers, and they will see what's working for them, and they'll be subject to what's, the peer system, so to speak, within that group, and word of mouth spreads. And so good performing grasses get used elsewhere. Poor performing grasses, it's kind of the end of the line. They can't escape what people are saying about it.
And is that what would trigger them to lose their license?
No, it wouldn't, but, the grass losing interest. The growers or the licensees losing interest. Yes, it would, in fact, if it is no longer popular and it's not profitable for the licensee to keep it because they're not able to make profit and run their business on it, they will eventually bail on the license and execute the early out options generally so that they can get out of the license because it's no longer their advantage to produce it. So things that perform well usually have a pretty long life in the industry. And one of the interesting things, we don't oftentimes think about this, but the intellectual property rights system in the U.S. really was set up to award in and benefit inventors, to give them enough time that there was really a benefit to all the investment in invention. But you really still don't know how good something is until after the patent expires on it, or the intellectual property rights. And if indeed that variety is still popular, then even more people start to grow it because it becomes public domain, then you know it really was a home run. And right now, some of our varieties are up against varieties that the late Dr. Glenn Burton created. He was the lead scientist in forage and also later turfgrass development down at the USDA ARS station at Tifton, Georgia. He had many public domain releases. In fact, I don't think the gentleman ever had a grass that was patented because it just wasn't done in that day and age. USDA didn't see to that. I really enjoyed the few times that I did get a chance to visit with him. He's now since passed, but he would make statements to me when I was just a wee tyke, so to speak, in the industry. When I'd ask him questions, he was a giant in the industry, and I'd ask him questions and he'd say, you know, Dennis, you really won't know whether you made the right decision until about 20 years after you release it. So I still keep those words of wisdom with me today, and I share those with others. That's what Dr. Glenn Burton personally said to me when he was visiting Dr. Taliaferro here, and I was kind of tagging along on the tour as a young scientist to listen to two of the giants in the industry of grass development speaking with each other and kind of giving us tips along the way.
Well, so how much longer do you have to wait on Latitude 36 to see if it meets that? How long has it been out?
Well, let's see. It was released in 2010, and I believe the patent came back about 2 or 3 years after that. So it's usually, well, it's definitely 20 years from date of filing with, it's provided the patent is actually granted. So it's, with it's 20 years from date of filing because the patent was granted. And usually it takes 2 to 3 years for the patenting process to work. So I believe 2011, the final application, a provisional application went in, and then it was finalized in 2011. So I believe that would be 2011 plus 20 years. So probably somewhere around 2031, somewhere in that.
You'll be around to see it, yes.
I hope to be.
Well, how did they come up with the name?
Latitude 36 was actually chosen by a combination of Sod Solutions and Oklahoma State University, and it was put on the final patent application. The provisionals went in with OKC, Bermuda grass, OKC 1119 for what would become Latitude 36, and 1134 for the Northbridge, another patent. But that was a joint effort by Sod Solutions, who was chosen as the licensee, and Oklahoma State University to attach that name on the patents of those grasses.
No real significance as to why Bridgeport then?
Well, with Latitude 36, we're actually at Latitude 36 in Stillwater. And the Northbridge? Northbridge actually was known to have a slight edge in winter hardiness. And so the folks at Sod Solutions had suggested that name Northbridge, bridge to the north, because of the improved winter hardiness of it, that they felt that would be a good name for it, and I think it is, yeah. Interestingly enough, we had a seeded Bermuda grass called Yukon, and when you envision Yukon in your mind, you think of it being cold and blustery. Well, Yukon, at the time when it was released, was one of the highest cold hardy Bermuda grasses at that time, and thus the name Yukon. That was actually our first turf type seeded Bermuda grass with improved winter hardiness and still having improved color, texture, density, overall quality.
Well, I'm assuming you get grants from various places to do research like this. It would be your primary, one or two of your primary places you would go for grants funding.
Very good question, and yes, you're absolutely right, and the team has very reliably been able to get United States Golf Association, or USGA, grants, And it's an interesting connection because Dr. Mike Kenna was on the development team here. He actually mentored his graduate student under Dr. Taliaferro, and then was actually hired back at a later time. And he was in my position as turf extension and research specialist for a few years. He left in February of '90, and I came in September of '90. And I've had a good working relationship with Mike even after he left. He became director of research with USGA. And USGA has funded continually here since 1986, before my time, a turf Bermuda grass breeding development effort. And I came in and was able to work with an existing grant and wrote one grant, and then otherwise was on the team that successfully submitted a series of grants for that. And our latest grants are working with trying to improve drought resistance while still retaining high turf quality and good winter hardiness.
Drought here.
Yes, and then we work on a large multi-state team with University of Florida, Texas A&M University, University of Georgia, and North Carolina State University, and our Oklahoma State University. So there's about 5 land-grant universities involved with that, and we exchange materials with each other. Dr. Yanchi Wu being our Bermuda breeder here, he will send off his materials to the other universities. They send ours. So being one of the field screeners, I end up screening St. Augustine's, Seashore Paspalums, Bermuda grasses, zoysia grasses for the other breeders, as well as Dr. Wu's material, which just comes down the hall, so to speak. So Stillwater, Oklahoma is a unique place because you can grow practically every turf grass here, but it's not adapted during every season. We actually have a lot of different life zones here in Oklahoma. And if you go to the southeastern part of the state, you'll see St. Augustine and Bahia grass. You go up to the panhandle and you're into only 10 inches of water a year. So you've got buffalo grass and grama and semi-arid conditions there. So you can imagine the difference between 50-some inches a year and 10 inches a year, and we fall somewhere in between there. So depending on what the individual year then is, it'll favor certain types of grasses and be against others, and then the next year may flip completely. So we're a great place to screen different varieties for breeders, and we've kind of capitalized on that over the years. Even before we had such a large geared up program, I would get grants, even small grants from small breeding programs to place the materials here, because it was known that Stillwater was a tough place to put your grass. It would be adapted one part of the year and then get really hammered the next part. But the things that survived could either be used to breed new things, or occasionally you'd have a good one there that was ready to go to market.
Well, once the license comes along, who gets the financial benefit of that? Is it the university, or is it whoever?
The way things are structured currently is that there has been changes actually in the view of inventorship in the U.S. over the years. And even though we work and are paid to develop grasses by the university, the laws have actually changed where the inventors have ownership of those. So that is not the way it has always been. Once upon a time it was drastically different, but it's viewed now in the legal system that the inventors actually have at least partial ownership, as well as the company, or i.e. university, the people of Oklahoma have ownership as well. So it's a joint ownership. The inventors actually sign over their rights for certain considerations. And the representative of the people, the Board of Regents, empowers the Technology Development Center, or TDC, here to represent the people in the regions in that manner. So the inventors sign over their rights for certain considerations. The TDC makes decisions as to whether the items look like they're going to be financially promising or a sinkhole, so to speak. So fortunately, by the time we get permission to release, we've been fortunate that TDC feels the materials have value to our citizens and that they're willing to upfront the costs, because it's going to be good for the people and also other U.S. citizens, and good for the university as well. And then there's intellectual property rights policy, so the university benefits the inventors, and then either the department or the college that it was associated with. So there's returns on the investment that come back in various parts of the university and to the inventors and to the departments. In the case of the United States Golf Association, because we accepted funding from them, they also get a portion of it, and it helps to continue the USGA's efforts. And actually, the director of research has told me that essentially the monies that OSU furnishes from the inventions that go to USGA are then just simply turned around in a grant back to the university to develop the next generations of materials. You know, after paying the permanent positions with USGA to manage the research internally there.
Pretty good partnership.
It is. It's a great working relationship, and we cultivate that. You really have lifelong relationships with the people that you work with, and there has not been a lot of movement through some of those positions. So Mike Kenna, he left 27 and a half years ago, but for 27 years I've had a good working relationship with Mike, and he actually held my position right before me. So we'll periodically talk about the challenges of the extension position, and I'll ask him what's been going on in his world of research, because he tours around, sees all the different programs. Not only the breeding programs, but also the management programs where they're doing research on fertilization programs, pest management, mowing, and other cutting edge technologies that apply to turf grass.
I guess that is part of it, when to cut, how much to cut, all of that.
Yes, and fitting grasses to different management regimes, since there's no one-size-fits-all program.
You just don't think of all these various aspects to grass. And our football field doesn't have real grass, so
We have
you guys need to work on
artificial turf grass there, but on OSU, some of OSU's practice fields actually have our grasses. The hedge field has Patriot on it, and that was one of our releases as well. That was the last vegetative type before Latitude 36, but after the two seeded types, Yukon and Riviera. And then there's Patriot over on some of the newer practice fields, and then there's artificial as well over there. And if you go over to the baseball field, Allie P. Reynolds has Riviera Bermuda grass. It's been renovated to Riviera, or seeded Riviera Bermuda grass. Todd Tribble, the field manager there, really enjoys working with Riviera.
So I guess part of it is how much traffic it could stand and recover from.
Definitely. Many folks won't understand that a sports field type Bermuda grass usually is very aggressive, and it will handle traffic if you cultivate it, manage it a certain way, and it is intended to grow rapidly. It was selected for those performance traits, and if you fertilize it, mow it, irrigate it under a certain regime, it will grow very rapidly and be able to handle traffic during the warm season of the year. Some of the features of a great sports field grass are not necessarily what you want next to your ornamental beds at home. Imagine a rapid spreading horizontal type, and we know one of the most intensive management practices is string trimming around concrete edges and ground ornamental beds. So you oftentimes want a slower spreading grass, not necessarily a sports field grass, for the home landscape. Something that looks good, but you're really not going to be putting a lot of traffic on it. Something that can handle shade and actually be lower maintenance, because it's not going to be fixing carbon so much like a carbon fixing factory, and you're not going to have a bunch of traffic on it. So different grasses fit different places, and that's where my extension hat comes on, because I've talked to you mainly about research hat so far. So the extension hat is convincing people when they come to you with their list of needs, what they feel that they want. You do a client and site assessment. You assess the site, see what the conditions of the site are, you listen to the client, what they tell you that they want, and you put that together with what we know that grasses can deliver and what they can't deliver, and whether we feel the client is capable of actually utilizing and maintaining that. Because it's one thing to buy a grass, but it's another to be able to maintain it on that site. And so we put that all into one big messy string ball, so to speak, for them, and then make a recommendation on what we believe that they should have in each little different part of the lawn. Sometimes they embrace that, and sometimes you're not telling them something that they want to hear. So what we oftentimes will tell them is, well, I don't think I can convince you. I'm not convincing you. You obviously want to go in this, so let me try to help you there. But here's where I think the grass is going to trip up for you. But after you test it, and you may show me that I'm wrong, because occasionally clients show me that I'm wrong and that they have been indeed able to culture it and manage it, but more often than not, I was correct in my assessment. After you get to that point and you really feel like, you need a change, come back and see me, and let's visit again, and we'll get you something set up that'll work for you.
Do you actually go out and
I do. It's probably less, it definitely is less now than it used to be. Our state's population has grown. We've experienced a lot of urbanization. Just living in the Stillwater community, it's amazing the amount of growth. And I always thought it was funny when I moved here, when I talked with old alumni, and they'd say, that used to be out in the country, and it's well enclosed within community. I find myself saying what they were telling me 27 years ago. That used to be out in the country, and now it's well within the community. With site visits, you used to do a lot of them. And part of a new faculty member is really to learn the local culture, learn the conditions, climatic conditions, the soils, the nature of the environment, learn about the people, what their needs are, what the local culture is. You have to do a lot of that and a lot of travel right up front to learn your new responsibilities. After a while, and that depends a while, you can imagine it in your head what they're telling you about. The good thing now, as opposed to when I came here 27 years ago, is digital diagnostics, digital imagery. Practically everyone has a smartphone with good camera capability. If I can just convince them to actually use the technology that they have in hand, I actually don't have to go out to probably 90 to 95% of the sites because of stored history here and on paper and just the knowledge of it, or having local contacts through our Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service, utilizing our county extension horticulturalists or our county extension agriculture educators. And I've mentored a lot of them, met a lot of great people over the years, seen a lot of folks retire from that, so it's all actually quite a mentoring system and working with a lot of new folks there. And so I'll actually have them go out to various sites and witness and see things. And it's new to them. It's new to a new person. And they may not have me come out, and they may actually be frustrated at times. And I'll say, well, John, I've been out there 17 times over the last 27 years. I can just about tell you what's going on with that. And so they'll go and visit and send some pictures, and I'll say, yeah, it was 7 years ago that such and such happened. This is just a repeat of that. Let me pull that file on that. So I do keep files on a lot of these sites, golf courses around the state. Residential, not so much, but there's a lot of commonality amongst residential problems as well. So we really can help them. If we can get people to submit those digital images and a little bit of narrative and do a case history. That's the other thing. I think we all feel that frustration when we go into a doctor's office and we say, I just want the doctor to see me. And you get this 10-page long form with all these questions, and they want to redo your case history. That case history is so important. So I've developed an appreciation for having to fill that darn form out, because while I'm not asking as many questions, that's a parallel of what I'm asking them. Tell me about all the fertilizations, mowings, irrigation, any pesticides you've applied. When you first noticed this, all of those types of things, there's a commonality between medical questions and trying to assess and help the client.
Do you also do city parks or that type of public space?
Yes. Grounds maintenance, we call that, and some of it can be commercial grounds maintenance, commercial properties, and some of it is public parks or recreation sites.
And as you travel around, do you think, oh, they need this type of grass? I mean, do you automatically assess as you go? Or can you relax and just skip that?
Well, even when we go out to play golf, being a nature lover, our research team would go out to golf, they joke and say, well, Dr. Martin can tell you about what bird that is singing right now. So oftentimes when I'm hitting poorly out in the rough, I'm going to go enjoy what I see of nature out in the rough, the different plants and the birds, that type of thing. And I'll see things out there, and then if we've got students with us, it's a good mentoring opportunity to show them things actually. But it's difficult for me to focus on the game sometimes because of what's underfoot.
Yes.
You've pegged me to a T, yes.
Kind of figured that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier something to do with right-of-ways?
Yes.
Roadside right-of-ways?
Yeah. When I actually interviewed, they told me that I would be leading up the long-term program grants with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Those are both research and extension training. And those have actually, the research end of those has actually been going since 1963. A person by the name of Dr. Wayne Huff. He's actually credited with founding our turfgrass program here. He was actually a forage research and teaching faculty member, and after World War II, when the housing boom actually started, there was a need for lawns in these many new houses, and that Dr. Huff started to dabble with turf grasses then. Oklahoma State University actually, I don't believe, didn't really have a turf program, but he took part of his forage program time and started to answer to that, and by the end of his career in 1980 or 81, he actually was 100% in turfgrass. So his career morphed from being a forage research teaching person into exclusively research teaching in turfgrass. And when I arrived here, many of the students practicing in the industry were his students that he had mentored and graduated. Many of them have retired now. There's still a few of them out there. Dr. Huffine passed in January 1991 while asleep after a nice long day of fishing. So that's the perfect way to go, I guess, when that time comes. But I did get a chance to meet him. Actually, his last PhD student was one of my mentors, Dr. Tom Fermanian, actually graduated from here in the 1980s. He was, I believe, Dr. Huffine's last PhD student. He was actually on my PhD committee at Illinois, so I got to hear a lot of stories about Dr. Wayne Huffine. Little did I know at that time I would be coming in to a program that he helped found. And even though it was in the agronomy department, it did move over to the horticulture department in the early 80s when Dr. Huffine retired.
A lot of connections. It was meant for you to be here, it
Absolutely.
sounds like.
Fate.
All right, the roadside
program. And like I told you, I take a circuitous route to things, but that program with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation uses federal pass-through dollars, and over the years, many of the in-house agronomists at the Department of Transportation have left and not been replaced, so they largely rely upon our roadside management team here, vegetation management team, to provide expertise, anything from recommended species and varieties to how to maintain it. The right-of-way, and state right-of-way at least, and also with the interstate transportation system, which ODOT is entrusted to manage, even though it was a federal system put in and through the states. We have the clear safety zone. That's the highly maintained area from the edge of the shoulder to the bottom of the bar ditch and maybe just a few feet up. And then there's the non-clear, non-safety zone outside that you get the ability to work with. And it goes all the way to the right-of-way fence. So there's actually two main types of areas, the clear safety zone and then the area outside of that. We term that collectively the right-of-way. So we spent a lot of our time talking about and teaching ODOT's many employees how to manage that. We will train about 700 or slightly under of their employees each year in proper pesticide application and decision making, mixing, loading, calibration of materials, and decision making for that clear safety zone. And then there's the outside clear safety zone. And you have a lot of flexibility with what you can do there. That also can save you some money on your budgets, or you can spend money depending on what the local needs are. When we celebrated the centennial in 2007, a lot of funds were spent to mow that year. There was actually more acres mowed in the centennial year than I believe any other year on the books.
Wow.
So, but whenever you have financial cutbacks, which all state agencies have experienced, you look for areas to save on. So ODOT currently has had a number of years of tight belts, belt tightening, so to speak. And so actually they wanted to look at reducing mowing in the area to do that in, and and not affect safety is to manage the area outside a clear safety zone. And they and we agree we don't want to cut back on mowing within the clear safety zone. The purpose there is to maintain a long sight distance for the motorists so they have the longest possible reaction time. If there's a troubling event ahead, whether it's going around a curve on a hill, if there's a stopped vehicle, we want folks to be able to see as far as possible to give them the most reaction time. If there's a deer running out, you want to make sure they can see it as far away as possible. But the areas outside clear safety zone, you have a lot of flexibility. And right now, Department of Transportation is trying to cut back on mowing that area if possible so they can save some of those funds. And when you get that kind of flexibility, you get a chance to work with wildlife. Is there something else you can add as a benefit to that situation, such as pollinators, or it might be ground nesting birds, something along those lines, or what we currently are working with, the Monarch initiative.
Which is why we're here today.
Yes.
I noticed the signs going out. I-51 and on 35, I think,
Yes.
that says Monarch Watch or Monarch Research or something. Is that, you have something to do with that?
Yes. Those signs say research and training. Then we show the Monarch, and then you see the ODOT logo on the bottom of this side, and then you see the OSU Agriculture, Division Ag Sciences and Natural Resources logo on this side. So it shows it's a cooperative working relationship with the Department of Transportation and Oklahoma State University through the Division of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources. And it's got a large female butterfly in the middle of it. We actually asked for one of the largest possible approvable signs that is a non-information sign. There's an amazing number of regulations regarding what signage can be in our interstate and even on state highways. So the signs that you see are actually about the largest permissible sign size for something that doesn't tell you about traffic conditions or the location of a route or something like that.
Did you help design it?
I actually did, and I put together a team of 20 people. And you know what's good about teams? You get all kinds of ideas. You know what's bad about teams? Eventually you have to narrow it down to a working set. And there were so many great ideas. In the end, I had to kind of go with the design that I had actually come up with initially, but I did wiggle it around a little bit to incorporate others' ideas. I wanted two different oranges though. I wanted an OSU orange, and then I wanted an orange that I perceived to be the color of the Monarch. And I should have realized this, that everyone's perceptions of color can be slightly different. In fact, at that time, I had probably looked at too many Monarch specimens that were dead, and they kind of bleach. They don't have the same colors as when they're alive. And one of the people that's on my steering panel with ODOT said, no, our sign shops in the end are going to print one orange, and we're going to go with that OSU orange there. Because I wanted a yellower, it ended up being a yellower orange, and they said they weren't going to do that. Well, they had a hard time convincing me, but since I had no choice, I had the matter of layout and design, but they were going to pick the colors of orange, and so it was forced on me. In the end, I have to admit that they made a good choice on the orange there. So.
It catches the eye as you go by, and I noticed it is on the hill, most of it.
Yeah,
So
there's
it's out of right away.
25 actual plots that are on State Route 51 and I-35, and there's at least one sign on each end of those. That's dual. Once the motorist sees and knows what's going on, it's something they can appreciate that's going on out there and say, oh, that's why that hasn't been mowed recently. That's a Monarch Habitat Research and Training location. It's also there for mowing crews, because mowing crews have a lot going on. You'd think they're sitting in that cab mowing, but actually you've got to watch. If you're near the road surface, you got to watch for any distractions there. You got to watch for signage. You got to watch for ditches. You got to watch for culverts, any tiger traps, so to speak, that are there. Over the years, occasionally ODOT maintenance crews have mowed over our research plots. So what we try to do is mow a border around it and put as visible a signs as possible. As you travel around the state, you may also see our blue and white signs. And those are there to tell you that it's a joint project between OSU and ODOT as well. They're not as colorful and as showy though as the Monarch plot signs.
I've seen those, I just haven't stopped to look at one closer up. You know, shouldn't, I don't guess, but.
Yeah, and so most of the time when you see the blue and white signs, they're going to be different herbicide trials, and what we're trying to do there is screen either new or generic materials that have come out, and we furnish that information to ODOT and we put it on an approved herbicide and adjuvant list after it's jumped through several hoops. Then the Department of Central Services can put that on a bid, and so ODOT will have a choice either between name brands or generics, and it's actually saving our taxpayers money. If the generic truly performed as well as the name brand product, then there's the opportunity to save money. If it's just cheaper but it's not as good, it's not necessarily a good deal. So when you have a generic, if it doesn't perform as well as the name brand, it oftentimes will not make it onto the approved list. If it doesn't make it on the approved list, it won't go out on the bid specs. And then things that are awarded the bid end up on the state contract, and then different ODOT divisions will purchase from that at, in theory, the best price. So they save the taxpayers money by getting the best price on that. And we know that the products work because they've jumped through the hoops in the research program. And then the Monarch program, I watched for the federal system to develop on this, and during the President Obama's administration, he had a white paper, what we call a white paper document that came out, and I knew that was the trigger to act. Because largely, Maintenance Division with Department of Transportation, while they have embraced the wildflower program, sometimes it's not convenient to have the wildflower plots. But when the President's white paper document came out, I knew that things were going to be moving. And it's always good to get out in front of something instead of being run over by it. So in 2015, I put in the Department of Transportation's annual proposals from our program to them, what I call the Monarch Initiative. And I went to Dr. Kristen Baum's presentation because I knew we were going to need a biologist on the team who knew a lot about it. I can appreciate butterflies, especially monarchs, have since I was a child, but in terms of knowing a lot about the biology, life history, and demands of those, I needed mentorship and training, and Kristen has given that to me as well as some other biologists. My forte was in vegetation management, and how do we manage invasive species through mowing and different herbicide applications. And then Kristen's been cooperating on the vegetation management team to help us learn about how to scout for them and what things influence the suitability of the habitat. And we've had a good close working relationship on this thus far 2-year project. But actually, Kristen had a program that was up and running and very nationally known well before I decided that we needed a Monarch initiative within ODOT's vegetation management program. So I knew the person to go to get that assistance to help ODOT with their emerging initiative.
Was it going to be longer than 2 years, do you think?
I believe it will. And like anything, you tend to oversimplify it at first, and then you get into it, and after a while, what you were doing at first to try to elucidate and get information out, you realize that isn't the best approach, but that's what research is about. You try something, it partially works, it needs refinement. That's really the scientific method. You test a hypothesis, and you retest the hypothesis, you modify the hypothesis. So we've done that with the methods, actually. So this next year, once we get into 2018, we're probably going to have a drastic change in what we're doing in the roadsides from a research perspective. We're actually finding out that these 100-meter long by 50-meter wide research plots just aren't near large enough because roadsides are highly variable, milkweed populations are highly variable, they're highly variable within the season and then from site to site. So we've got to control that variability in order to really answer some of our research questions. But we have learned some key things. Keeping ODOT's maintenance group involved with the data actually on a day-by-day basis that we're getting can help them make decisions on a weekly or monthly basis. And I call them sometimes painful decisions. And this is an interesting situation because some of the best monarch habitat is actually on State Route 51 headed west I-35. And if you do a midsummer mowing, you actually can stimulate regrowth on the green antelope horn or green milkweed so that you get some lush growth if we get mid to late summer rains, which we've gotten this year. So it actually creates good habitat for monarchs. But we also know that many of the alumni want that corridor mowed down as if it's a lawn. And so Kristen was out surveying a couple weeks ago and finding enormous usage of the green antelope horn by the monarch. There were lots of eggs on different plants and larvae eggs starting to hatch and larvae on there. And so I got that information of that extensive use during the day, going out there and working with her portion of the team. And I summarized that in a very extensive note to our Division 4 people. And I sent it to them, and I sent images, support images. And I said, we'd really like you to hold off on mowing those areas outside clear safety zone. Hit the safety zone, mow it, do contour mowing, but let's try to leave the areas outside clear safety zone. But I also put in there, I know this is a challenge because I know there's a lot of competing interests because some people like the entire roadside mowed fence to fence as if it's a lawn. And unfortunately, a lot of the area that's good habitat is that main corridor, the visibility corridor coming into Stillwater. And a lot of the parents of our students want that neat, tidy looking because that is the front door of the university also between I-35 and Stillwater. So we have a lot of competing interests for what should be going on in that right of way out there.
Just bigger signs for monarchs. It's the right color at least.
Yes, it is.
So to make the areas bigger, you're just going to move the signs out?
That's one possibility. Also the possibility is that we're going to have to cultivate the milkweed themselves, actually crop the milkweed, take the variability of their environment away from them, put them in a more stable environment, and then put the treatments on them then and find out how they perform where we get rid of some of the roadside noise, so to speak. Roadside's a noisy environment because of traffic. We joke about that, but there is a lot of variation in roadsides because of soil types, different facing slopes, the amount of cut versus fill slope that's out there, and the vegetation that was established over the years. And what's growing on the other side of the fence on private land oftentimes influences what's growing in the right of way as well.
Well, I've heard various people talk about a state plan for monarch conservation. Are you involved with that?
Yes, I'm on both the research committee and also the right-of-way committee for our state monarch plan.
Is it coming along nicely?
It is. It's in a first draft review right now by the entirety of the committee. Each subcommittee put together parts of it, then those were assembled into a draft, and right now the overall entire committee is mulling over.
And how many people is that, roughly?
There, and I don't know the exact answer, but there is easily 50 people on that. And of course you have a wide variety of opinions on what should be done, and you have a wide variety of opinions on what will be able to actually be done.
Well, I guess part of it would be educating the people that are coming in and out that there's a reason why it's not mowed on the sides.
Yeah.
Getting that message out.
And if you follow certain of our TV stations, you'll know there's opportunities for citizens to rant on different topics periodically. And in some stations, it's called My Two Cents, and on other stations, it's called Rant. So if you look occasionally, you'll see topics where you get to see the citizens' response to delayed mowing or reduced mowing and what their true feelings are about that. And it's quite colorful at times and quite varied. as the different groups give their opinions on what ought to be done and whether it's worthwhile ODOT's engagement in the pollinator program and monarch program.
Well, is there an average citizen on the committee for the state plan?
Well, it's hard to say what an average citizen is. There is no such thing, actually. And of course, we're all citizens, and we all have widely varied opinions. There are people that engage on the committee from various standpoints of being retired, but everyone on there is passionate in some way, shape, or form about the monarch and how the plan should be developed, how it will influence their own area that they work in, their profession. So it's quite an interesting group.
Well, is there a expected finish date for the plan?
I would say probably early 2018 at this time. Yeah, it could come out possibly before then, but early 2018. And of course, it's going to be completely a voluntary plan. Anyone that lives in Oklahoma knows that we have some of the most lax regulations of any state regarding anything that pertains to trying to work with different aspects of the environment, things like that. We actually have a statewide, what's called a managed pollinator plan, and it is completely voluntary. And that was put out by the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry after citizen input at meetings around the state. And it was last year, I believe, or very early this year, that the managed plan came out. Managed meaning generally about honeybees and how to manage in a positive fashion for them to make sure they've got nectarine sources and how not to make certain mistakes with pesticides or in mowing down pollinator plants at certain times of year, and even where to position hives and those types of things, and notification. We actually have a sensitive crops viewer that the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry creates, and it lets people know where the apiaries are located so that people know where people that keep bees have them located. And it's interesting because the people that actually work with bees say that some citizens have hostilities towards bees. So they've actually had some hives stolen, some hives vandalized. So sometimes there's actually a resistance to revealing the location of the hives. But if you're going to make pesticide applications or you're going to engage in certain management practices, you want to know where the hives are at because you create buffer areas around them where you don't engage in certain activities within a radius of that, because you want to allow for a buffer area between where the hives are at and whatever the particular management practice is that you're engaging in. So things can get very complicated as you have all these competing interests with right-of-way and private land and trying to work with pollinators, and all of us carrying our own ideas in there about what a roadside should look like, how it should be managed, where someone like me who likes contour mowing, short mowed safety zone, and then try to get rid of all the invasives out in the other area and keep it all native, and maybe do an occasional mowing of it and also keep down the brush, but largely have it there for wildlife and insects, versus someone that says, no, that should be a finely mowed lawn and it should look like a lawn from fence to fence.
Well, what are some of the invasive, well, milkweed I guess would be considered invasive.
Milkweeds in the right-of-way now, we've gone through a transformation in viewing it as a desired part of the native plant composition in areas outside clear safety zone. Now, if that milkweed occurred in that clear safety zone that's supposed to be kept below 12 inches and is frequently mowed at a 5 to 6 inch height, then the milkweed is considered undesirable in that area. But we have very little milkweed in the clear safety zone. It was relatively easy to control through standard herbicide practices. So the milkweed we're talking about cultivating and to the best benefit of the monarch is in the area outside clear safety zone. Private landowners will view milkweed in a different manner because milkweed is said to cause problems in grazing animals, but many people will observe that grazing animals oftentimes will not graze it. But if you cut it and it's in hay and you put it in a bale, it's another matter because there it's dried down and it's part of the baled forage. So you'll see folks actually trying to treat it with herbicides in cultivated pasture that's going to be baled. So they'll try to exterminate it in that situation. Also in crop situation, we don't want it, in cultivated crops. So in cultivated crops, we'll try to clean it out of there. And that has actually probably led to this situation. Because when I was a teenager, I alluded to earlier, I worked in the fields. I can't tell you how many thousands of common milkweed plants that I hacked out of those fields with a hoe. I never could get the rhizomes, the underground stems that had dormant buds. So you whack the tops of them off to soil level, and you come back in 3 weeks to get the next shoot that would come up. Well, it was quite tolerant of that. And if you look at milkweed and soybeans in the 1970s and into the early 80s, we did not have really herbicides that could take milkweed out of soybeans, because that you're talking about taking a broadleaf weed out of a broadleaf crop. We didn't have herbicides that could do that. Really, until we had Roundup resistance in these crops, only at that time could we take these certain types out. If you have Roundup resistant soybean, you're able to take out things like milkweed out of there. Not until we had that technology available were we able to really exterminate milkweed out of soybeans and the like. And I don't know that the records are that great, but actually that has been tagged largely with the declines in population of monarchs because of loss of habitat. Now, if you tell a Midwestern farmer that he or she can't control the milkweed in their crop, you're probably going to hear a variety of responses. So again, it's a competing interest type of situation. But we have a lot of areas around the country, whether it's in this state or other areas, that aren't intensive with crop. And those are opportunity areas for improving habitat if we alter our maintenance. And so Department of Transportation is just one small player in the whole scheme of things. I actually thought of rights of way being much larger by state managed rights of way is what I'm talking about there than they really are. But it's just a tiny little narrow strip in the whole scheme of things, a very narrow strip of land between cleared safety zone and the right-of-way fence, where the private landowner, for the most part, is managing things on that side. So we were talking about actually a very, very small area of opportunity in the whole scheme of things. The greatest opportunity is actually in private managed lands, and in our state, a little bit on state government managed lands, but I'm trying to recall if we've got either 93 or 98%, somewhere in that range probably, of our land in Oklahoma is privately owned. So it's not going to be a government solution. This is going to be a citizen solution in private land ownership if we're to improve habitat overall.
Well, once this plan is done, will it be disseminated to a wide variety of places?
It will. I still don't think largely that our citizenry is aware of the plight of the monarch. We say it's an iconic species because as children we enjoy the bright, colorful things, and especially the transformation that comes about from egg through caterpillar to this wonderful butterfly. Perhaps with computer generations of people, we're even less connected with the natural environment. So it could be a very difficult sell to the majority of our citizens, and many people live in what we call the built environment, the urbanized environment of buildings, concrete, asphalt, and even the plant palette is very narrow. We think about Bermuda grass lawns, maybe just a handful of tree species that are used, and ornamentals that are largely cultivated or brought in from other parts of the world. If you look at the typical plant palette, it's not very friendly to pollinators in general. So that's something that also has to change. Use a wider variety, and even though we, as a horticulturalist, trained horticulturalist, I can enjoy highly cultivated plants and was trained largely in introduced species, but I think we have to increase the number of native species that we're using to help pollinators. And also I think we all need to enjoy a sense of place of where a landscape is at so that we don't try to make everything look like it's a landscape from some distant part of the world or some place in a higher rainfall belt or someplace like that. Oklahoma has a unique beauty to it, and hopefully we can get people to appreciate that and dabble a little bit more in native species and help out pollinators.
Do you have some on your property?
I certainly do. I do work in pollinator conservation, so I'm all in.
Do you have a Monarch Watch garden, whatever they call those? I think Monarch Watch
Yes.
garden.
Mine isn't formalized yet.
Way station.
Way station, yes. I haven't applied yet for official way station status, but I actually have the tall thistle, which is a great pollinator-friendly plant. I have a number of different milkweeds, a number of different native plants that benefit pollinators, not only from various bee species and fly species to the monarch itself. And then I also have started to dabble in bringing the monarch eggs inside and try to keep up with feeding the caterpillars. And being obligate to milkweeds, that can actually be quite a challenge to keep them in the forage that they need, especially as they get into 4th and 5th instar larvae, where their appetite is absolutely enormous.
And do you have children?
No, I don't.
I was going to say, you're watching, well then how does your wife feel about that coming into the house?
She has learned to enjoy that. When I was a graduate student, there was one year where I had a field pathology class, and I was bringing every crop under the sun with its diseases on there into the refrigerator, and I was taking up a lot of refrigerator space. So it was probably that year where she really knew, even though we'd already been married for a couple of years, she really knew what she had taken on at that point.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you had memories of monarchs from your childhood. Do you want to share any particular ones that
Yes.
stand out?
And I have actually tried to locate the photographs from that time, and I'm still having trouble doing that. In the late 1960s, I distinctly recall my grandfather on the Martin side at his rural property outside of East Lynn, Illinois, a hedge, Osage orange, or hedge apple as we called it in the upper Midwest. Each late August, it would be a roost site for tens of thousands of monarchs. That hedge was approximately 20 feet wide and 80 to 100 feet long. It's been long gone and bulldozed since about 1975. But in the late 1960s, each late August, it would be a stop point roosting site for tens of thousands of monarch butterflies. And it was so commonplace that all in the family knew about it that it wasn't remarkable. But by today's standards, that would be quite remarkable. I know that we took photographs of it. I can't find those photographs. I have still yet to go back to the 8mm movie film, though, and get that transferred to video now, and I think that may be where it's located. The other thing about, when you're talking about that kind of time that's passed, a majority of the family members have passed on. And the ones that I can question now about it have no recollection of it. But others even now will tell me about, they knew, outside the family, they'll tell me, well, I knew of such places, roost spots, because it was on my uncle's, or some folks from western Oklahoma will tell me about a roost site that they know of each year where it's reliably roosted on overnight during the fall migration season.
It would be neat to see, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. And the other thing that was interesting was my mother told me about her personal relationship with the milkweed plant. And during World War II, children in the primary school system were actually encouraged to go out with a burlap sack. And she said teachers occasionally would dismiss them early if the kids promised to take their burlap sack out, go to the milkweed plants, and collect the pods as they were at a certain stage of development. And if I'm not mispronouncing the name, kapok was what was used in life vests at that time. And that was made from the filamentous fibers of the milkweed plant. So the teachers would tell the students that they were benefiting the war effort by gathering the milkweed pods because that was going to be used in life jackets. And so you were helping service people by gathering that because those were going to be used in life jackets at that time. So she distinctly remembers that during World War II, the kids being dismissed early to go out with burlap sacks and collect the milkweed pods.
Well, maybe that was the seed that planted you on your path.
Could be.
Can go back to that.
Could be.
Well, we've covered a lot. Is there anything that I need to ask that I haven't? I mean, we've covered most of what's on my signage was the thing too. How often do you go out and check where in the research areas?
I'm out there anywhere from once a month to several times a month. In this particular season, am the boots on the ground doing the mowing because I had 2 staff members that were doing that, and they both left within 10 days of each other. They were fully trained, and they took some career advancements. I can't blame them for that. I still maintain a good contact relationship with them. But I actually am in the process of trying to refill those staff positions. But because of their loss, I'm out there doing the mowing of those plots. And
all 25?
All 25. Actually, there's 5 of them that are never mowed, so I guess there's 20 of them. 20 of those 25 plots at some time or another I'm going to have to mow, and 5 of them I mow 3 times during the summer and once during the winter, and then several of them during midsummer. So I'm seeing those plots. Yeah.
Push mower or riding lawnmower?
Well, actually I've been able to borrow a tractor-mounted 8-foot wide brush hog from our field research service unit, and it is very helpful in knocking out a lot of area quick, but some of those plots are located on steep slopes. Mm-hmm. ODOT actually has large mowers that are more stable. They'll have 3 gang units on some of those, and those create a very stable mowing unit that allows them to address some of those very steep slopes. Plus they're more talented because of their years of experience in mowing those steep slopes. I don't actually push the envelope too much. If I feel like I'm headed for an unstable slope or too steep with a really high rollover hazard, I'll then transfer to the walk-behind brush mower. And it's a small 34-inch wide brush mower which allows me to tackle even the most steep of slopes because you're on a walk-behind self-propelled brush mower, and that's where I pick up the other ones.
Do you mow them for different heights, or?
Currently, we're mowing them at 5 inches, and that kind of simulates ODOT's heights of between 4 and 6 to 8 inches. We have talked about in the future going with different mowing heights because TxDOT actually, I guess they have a specification where they don't mow below 7 inches. But depending on what kind of vegetation and what's been let go, ODOT may have to grind down some areas to about 4 inches, even though in our mowing manual it says don't mow below 6 inches. But it depends on what the vegetation is there. And also, if you're only going to mow in midsummer and then again in the winter, the vegetation can become quite tall, dense, and rigorous. So a lot of times as you go to mow it, a standard height of like 6 inches will merely kind of knock it over. So you actually sometimes have to mow it a little bit below that, and that's what their experience is. So there's some outcomes that we've discovered that we hadn't originally envisioned. And of course, that's what always happens with research. You can't possibly know what you're going to be getting into, but you will soon once you engage in it.
Well, before you start mowing, do you check to see if there's something you shouldn't mow down because it's got
we do scout.
bands on it?
Anytime you're going to be in the roadside, you're going to encounter things that you did not know that are there. Anything from a biological sharps hazard that someone threw out syringe-wise, to anvils, to 200 and 300 pound anvils, which might have a $1,000 value on them, to drug paraphernalia, to shoes, to all manner of things. So you never know what you're going to encounter on a roadside. So you have to scout an area, especially in a research plot, before you go in there.
And you have found these similar things?
Everything that I've just told you about, I've encountered on roadside right-of-way before.
on 51?
On various places
Various ones, okay.
where research trials were located.
So you have to wear boots?
You should definitely have on appropriate PPE, not only from the hands and the boot standpoint. And then there's the natural hazards like chiggers and ticks. And you don't think about that, but anytime that you're walking in vegetation that's not short mowed like a lawn, you give them positional advantage. It only takes one time out there with a good case of chiggers before you learn to spray down next time. One of the senior members of our roadside team who retired in 2003, Lonnie Cargill, told me a special technique which I still tell people about. It's not the most glamorous of appearance that you put yourself in when you do this, but if you'll take some duct tape the cuffs of your long trousers to your boots tight so the chiggers can't get underneath, and then you spray over your boots and over your long trousers, the chiggers have no chance of getting underneath, whereas if you don't duct tape or hold the trousers close to the boot, they will even, when you spray, sometimes get a chance to get underneath there, and then you'll get bites all up and down the leg. But we go through a tremendous amount of DEET in our program for chigger repellent, mosquito repellent, also tick repellent, because those natural hazards are out there, not counting the human-related hazards that you have. And we have, of course, have safety lights on our truck because folks traverse our roadways in various conditions, from some of which they should not be driving under, and then others that are daydreaming and they're merely pointing at the vehicle in front of them. So we've learned over the years to make sure we put our vehicle well into the grassy area and make sure that our full series of blinking hazard lights are on. And we have a special hazard bar that allows us to use the red and blue lights on there and the pulsing high intensity lights as well, all of that with safety in mind. And then we are, in our contract, actually have to wear safety vests. And we try to wear as much fluorescent yellow-green as possible when we're out there because it can be a hazardous environment.
Plus sunscreen and a hat, I'm assuming.
Always. Long sleeve trousers, long sleeve shirt, neck wrap, broad brim hat.
Tools of the trade.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You don't think about all those things when you're doing this. I'm learning.
I teach a safety portion to the turf camp. Tomorrow's undergraduates realizing the future, and I teach the safety portion of that. So I talk about safety vests, and that's Shelley Mitchell is the lead on that camp. A number of different faculty cooperate with it each year, and there's usually about 25 youth that come to that 2-week camp. And my small portion of it is about an hour long, and I teach about safety in the landscape. And I'll talk about hearing protection, the use of COP hearing protection, foam earplugs, how to properly insert those, how to properly take them out. We talk about sharps hazards, anything from machetes to mower blades, safety around mowers. We talk about foot safety, when to wear steel toe boots, when not to, when it's okay to wear leather boots and never flip-flops when you're mowing the lawn. And so we go through all those manner of things and how to work with the lawnmower and the various safety portions. And we'll use some of my own personal experiences and those of my friends as we go through those. So I had a friend in grade school out with another friend, and they were cutting what we call wiener sticks for a hot dog roast. Well, one friend was grabbing the stick and the other had the machete. And there was a very unfortunate accident that took 30 surgeries to correct of one friend. So I recount stories like that. So machete safety. We review fillet gloves with them, which are the wound Kevlar and stainless steel. And we oftentimes see them as being valuable only for filleting fish, but anytime you're going to cut vegetables or work with sharp blades or lawnmower blades, those are also helpful in safety. And we show them how easy it is to cut. We have a hot dog which simulates the finger. And I'll put the stainless steel and Kevlar wound glove, and I'll take a fillet knife and I'll go across my protected finger. And I'll tell them, don't do this at home, but look what the glove's capable of protecting you against. And some kid may say, well, that knife isn't sharp, so we're prepared for that. So we take the hot dog out, and I hold it in this hand and I just merely go with a little bit of energy like that, and it cuts the hot dog off and it goes flying through the air. We tell them about safety helmets and face shields because of flying debris. If you're trimming with a string trimmer and you have rocks and things thrown, so we'll allow the kids to take the machete and do a light tap against the polycarbonate front protector over the watermelon, and we'll show them the indentation and scratch on the safety visor, and they can see that on there, and then we'll pull the safety visor off and we'll say, now with the same amount of force, just tap that melon, and it'll go in about this deep on there, and they get to see what that polycarbonate safety visor did against that machete versus not having it there. We have them also staff a hammer. We put the safety helmet on the melon, and they get to tap the hammer there, and the melon experiences a little abrasion around the band. We tell them about that purpose of the band, spreading the force over a larger area, and then we take the helmet off and have them use the same amount of force on the melon and obviously see what happens there. So we teach them about those types of safety equipment, hands-on, using fruits and vegetables and hot dogs, about what that safety equipment is able to achieve. So, and we've had faculty even say, I thought about your demonstration the other night. Shelley herself, Shelley Mitchell, told me I had steel-toe boots on and my horse stepped on my foot. And while it didn't feel good, I knew it was a better night than what it would have been had I not had those steel-toe boots on.
That's some of your extension coming in handy.
Yes.
Hands-on.
Yeah,
Yes.
Some of the extension and life experiences and my friends' experiences from over the ages, and that all comes out to the students during that safety training.
That sounds like a very good experience for them.
It's fun, and we get good feedback from it. So.
There's nothing that's it's not a common, typical day for you. It doesn't sound like you're doing various things. It can't get boring.
It's never a boring day.
Yes.
And I was always amazed by students that would tell me, I didn't get anything out of that class. And I even to this day say, I have never taken a class in my life where I didn't gain something out of it. And I'm pretty sure I use that stuff on a daily basis. Of course, they'll roll their eyes because they think that's a canned statement. And I guess you can say it is a canned statement, but it's absolutely true from my perspective. And you never know what life's going to throw at you on a daily basis, and you use those skills and experiences and the mentoring that we've had the benefit of from others on a daily basis to deal with what life throws you, because you never know what's around the next corner.
Well, what do you think's around the next corner for you?
I have no idea, but I'm excited to get there.
Retirement anytime soon?
I think it's over a decade away.
Okay, that's good. Good time, enough time for the Monarchs to bounce
I'm
back.
just having too much fun at this.
And you get to see golf courses.
Absolutely.
And do patents.
And more golf than you can possibly play, and get to work with our development team and the development of new grasses and the patenting of those things.
And meet the public.
Absolutely. I love to work with the public. Wish I could get out more, but of course we serve about 1.5 million total households. I think our population has grown to be about that many total households in the state, and even if just a fraction of them had lawn problems, you realize how overwhelming it can be. So we use our network of county extension educators and our other professional colleagues that are out there in the industry to help them as they help folks with their various lawn and landscape needs.
I think they'll be thankful that you're in our state.
From what they tell me, they enjoy our close working relationship with it, and I certainly enjoy it as well.
Well, my last question, I usually have people tell me how they want to be remembered. When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
Wow, now I would oftentimes have an answer to that, and I probably have several, and I think probably I never took a course where I didn't get a lot out of it. And there's some various other ones, but none come to mind at the moment. I'm sure as soon as I walk out the door, they'll come flooding.
Do you want to be known and remembered as the turf guy?
One of OSU's turf guys. Yeah.
And a friend of the monarch.
Friend of the monarch, definitely.
And pollinators.
And pollinators and wildlife in general. I'm a person that believes that if we all work closely together, we can make these things a win-win situation. This is not an either or. And even though things can be competing interests, you can give a little bit here and take a little bit there. So we can make these winning situations, but apathy is probably one of the worst things to fall under, because you can see just the mere statement that which I mentioned earlier about, well, that used to be out in the country. That's a common theme for anyone that lives, you know, anywhere for any length of time. You'll come to the point where you're ready to say, well, this place used to be out in the country, and it's no longer. It's been encapsulated by the urban movement. So we have to accommodate the natural world in some way, shape, or form.
Bridge it.
Definitely.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll say thank you very much for coming today. It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure as well. Thank you.